Sober Witch Live podcast. Let's see. You know what? We're going to find out. This might be, I don't know, might be live streaming to my Facebook page as well as to YouTube. And of course, we record this for the podcast. So, welcome back, everybody, to the Sober Witch Life podcast. I'm Sunshine, the pink haired sober witch. And today's whole topic is brought to you, inspired by the email that Spirit had me write for the Recovery Coven this morning. So Mondays, I do kind of like a whole bunch of content. I write my email for the week. I post any blog posts that need to be posted from the Witchual Hour or podcast guest spots that I've been on, a whole bunch of content. But I wrote this morning's email and I asked Spirit, I said, what do I share? And it came out that some folks right now may be feeling like this time of the year is really heavy. And I just want to touch base on that today. You're not imagining it, right? I want you to just think for a moment what we just stepped out of, right? We just had the holidays that basically started at Halloween. Let's be real. Right? Halloween starts them. We continue on through. We're all planning for Thanksgiving. We get through Thanksgiving and now it's all Christmas or, who knows? Maybe it's Hanukkah. Maybe it's Kwanzaa. Maybe it's Yule. Like it's all of this just go, 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 go in that time of the year. And now we're done and over with it. Right? And looking back, you may feel very exhausted. You may feel incredibly overwhelmed at just everything that just happened. You may be still sitting there with like the little birds twirling around your head, like, what in the world was this? You might even have some regret for maybe some people you didn't see or arguments that you got into. You may be feeling grief, right? Maybe you had a loved one that passed and this was your first holiday season without them. Or maybe your kids are getting older and you're realizing the holidays just aren't what they used to be. Right? And your life looks different, right? Maybe you're in recovery and it was your first year where you didn't have alcohol as a part of every stinking holiday or drugs around every stinking holiday or anything to help you cope with the overwhelm that this time of the year could bring, right? And you would think that maybe culturally speaking, we would understand all of this and just create January as this space to be, to feel, right? But no, we're met with all of this pressure. We're told to set goals, make resolutions, what are you going to do to fix things? You got to be motivated. Hey, like now's the time to take care of discipline. Have you created your 2026 plan, right? What are you doing? Be better, right? Be better than you were yesterday. And that can be really painful for anyone, let alone those of us that are in recovery, right? Those of us that are witches, those of us that are sensitive. And I can't tell you how many folks that I have talked to in the last week that have just said their nervous system feels as though it is stretched thin, right? The truth is, statistically speaking, by the end of January, almost every, I think it's 65 to 70% of all of the individuals that set a New Year's resolution have abandoned them. And that's not a failure of willpower. I believe very strongly that it's a sign that we don't do the beginning of the year the right way, right? It's a sign that we're taught to approach change and transformation as though there's like a starting gun and we're just going to go. So if you feel like you're behind, if you're feeling defeated, if you are feeling like, what's the point? It's already 19 days into the new year, right? You're not behind. You're not broken. You're just human. You're a human being that, let's be real, operates with the cycles of nature. You add in all of that on top of everything that we're going through in the collective right now, in that broader collective, right? There's instability in the world. There is all of this noise around us. There are neighbors, right? Maybe it's not you, but there are people throughout every place in this world that are struggling just to survive right now or feel any ounce of safety. And for those of us in the north like me, now we add the cold, the clouds, the snow, this long stretch of being forced to remain indoors. So January can feel incredibly emotionally heavy. It could feel like it's forcing us to be slow, and we can be really tender. So I asked this question, instead of fighting that, what if we just honored it? Right? I've talked about this before, right? And I think it's really important to mention again, especially now at this particular time. Um, there's a really harmful story, especially in our Western culture, that slowness, pausing, not working, resting means that something is wrong, that we're lazy, that we lack motivation. But when we look around us outside and we recognize that we are literally in winter right now, we see a lot different lesson being taught to us. Winter is not a mistake, right? This pause, this slowness, this, kind of death that surrounds us is not a mistake. It's not an interruption. It's not this failure to blossom. It's a necessary part of the cycle of nature. It's the time where roots begin to grow even deeper, right? Energy begins to pull inward. And the reality is, what cannot be sustained is released, right? If you had a plant, for example, that bloomed last year, right? I think biennials are like this, and it put on its all big show. It's not going to come back. It's going to release. You may actually need to replace it. Gardeners, we get this. You may have a plant that has bloomed for a year, 2, 3, 4, 5, and out in that fifth or sixth year, it has grown so big and so large that it just cannot handle itself in that area anymore, and it will start to shed. It'll start to die off, right? Mother Nature is doing this beautiful thing where it is showing us, right, something so valuable, right? When we decide to quiet down, when we decide to slow down, beneath the surface, there is work that is happening. And I think a lot of us witches certainly feel this season a lot more. And those of us that are in recovery, you know, I'm gonna bet, even if you don't identify as a witch, you're gonna feel this, right? You're gonna start to feel more of this natural cycle of life. Our bodies begin to respond to the darkness. Our spirit calls us to turn inward, right? And our systems, our nervous systems, our physical bodies know this is not the time for us to force. I remember, I'm being reminded of this story of last year. A very dear friend of mine ended up pulling their back out in like the end of December, beginning of January. And they were like almost out of commission for like 2 months, 3 months. Our body knows these things. It will force us with colds, flu, right? If we try to move beyond what we are intended to move beyond during this time of the year. This tension and conflict comes when the rest of the world around us demands us to be productive, to be motivated, to push, to go, to fix, when our soul is asking for rest, reflection, and even planning. Sometimes it's just time to create a plan right now, not to take any action. You're not meant to be your brightest in January. And it really matters for us to stop, pause, and reflect on when we're moving and approaching Imbolc, right? The beginning of February is Imbolc. It is identified in the pagan calendar as the first spring, right? And I know that can be pretty weird to think of, because if you're in the north like us, the beginning of February is some of the coldest days, the coldest nights. right? But if you, once again, are a gardener, if you're that green witch that's listening, you know what this time is for. You may have gotten your seeds outside to do some wintering as well, right? Things begin to stir underneath that frozen ground. There are certain plants and seeds that require this cold in order to tell those seeds, hey, by the way, you're about to be called to grow. Get ready for it, right? The days are beginning to get a little bit longer. By the end of January, I think it's like a whole hour that we gain, right? Life is quiet. Nature is quietly beginning to reorganize itself, reorientate itself, prepare itself for a tremendous amount of growth that will happen as the year begins to turn. So this time of the year is this threshold, this liminal space, right? And I truly believe this space begins in the beginning of November, right? It begins around Samhain and it goes all the way to Imbolc. And for those of us that are in recovery, this may feel deeper, right? Because we know healing rarely arrives all at once. It's going to come in the small moments, right? We get a little bit more capacity, a little bit more honest. We're able to cry around a few more people, right? We get a bit more hope. Imbolc reminds us that we are not here to transform everything overnight. It's going to take some time to tend to the embers, to protect what's beginning to warm up, to trust that the growth that we are meant to experience is happening even when we cannot see it. So I thought I would share some of my favorite ways during this time of the year to get yourself through it, to support yourself through it, right? And the number one is dreaming, right? For me, I start dreaming about what my garden will be. For you, maybe it's dreaming about what you might want to do this summer. Maybe it's dreaming about planning, a project in the summer or a summer vacation, right? Begin to dream, to think, to explore, right? So I'm not out there planning. Like, don't get me wrong, I'll be starting some seeds here soon, but I'm like, what do I want to buy? How do I want to germinate them? Do I want to germinate them? Do I have the time? Do I have the patience? Can I get some help? Do I have the supplies? What do I need to get? I just start dreaming. What would I like to grow? What kind of things? And so I decided, right? I did make this decision. I'm going to add some wormwood and some feverfew into the garden this year, right? Because let's be real, I'm a witch. I got some magic in that garden. Right? This dreaming is this act of hope without any type of urgency needed. It reminds us that life is continuing and we get to look forward to things, right? And we don't have to rush them. My second is allowing green spaces to help heal us. So I am very blessed, and maybe you have this where you are. I have 2 different conservatories that are nearby. Maybe you've got a nice mall that's got a nice indoor garden in it. Maybe there's some place that you can go indoors that has some plants and greenery, right? I love this, right? We were just talking yesterday about potentially making a trip this coming weekend, right? Because you get to walk in there and see life. You get to see the green. You get to breathe it in. And it reminds us that winter and what we see outside is not always the whole story. That warmth exists, that we can seek it out, that we can find it, and that growth is always happening everywhere. It's a beautiful way to help calm that nervous system too, right? The third thing, I love to cook and I love to play with recipes. It might be soups, it might be stews, it might be breads, it might be cookies or cakes. So I've got 2 things. One, I've been like running around this idea of this like baked oatmeal with beans in it, right? Because I'm always trying to find ways to add beans or fiber into, different things. And so I've played with a couple of recipes to try out. So either today or tomorrow I'll be making this one. And, I like to add stuff in, like for magic. So maybe apples for some love, or cinnamon for luck, or chocolate chips for delight, because that's one of my words for the year, right? One of the things that I want. And so this is a really beautiful way to put our magic into our food and to make sure that we're nourishing ourselves, right? Putting the care into what we're feeding ourselves. I also love art projects during this time of the year. So I have a lot of our crafting supplies are in the garage, which is outdoors and cold. But I always have tons of sketchbooks, pencils, pens. I'll draw that garden very often. I'll draw flowers. I'll draw the sun. Any kind of project that I can do with just simple pen, paper, crayons, markers that are easy and around. I love it, right? There's no having to do any of this, right? And we get to play. And play is a really, really beautiful healing act for us. And a reminder for those of you that's like, I'm not an artist. I'd argue that with you all day and all day, right? But B, you don't have to be good. You don't have to think that you're good. You don't have to, all you have to do is give yourself some time to just enjoy it, right? And the last thing that I do is I use this time of the year in the house to do some really deep cleaning. So I started in November. I did the whole basement area. I did on my ritual room upstairs, redid that whole thing. It's incredible. I should, one day I'm going to share some videos from up there. I redid our laundry room, and next is the bedroom, which includes like getting rid of a whole bunch of things to donate, right? It allows you, when you do this deep clean, especially when it's a purge, right? Throwing things away, donating things, it allows you to literally release the physical things that are no longer serving you, right? So as without, so within. We release them in our external space. And in that same process, magically speaking, there are things that are going to be released in us, right? When we do all of these things in the external world, as I'm saying, we begin to shift our inner world as well, right? And when we look at the things around us, we can start to surround ourselves with reminders of what we love. We can choose environments that soothe our nervous system, like that conservatory. We can put the care and intention into what we eat, right? All of these things allows us to find more peace in a time that may feel heavy. And this isn't indulging. And I don't look at this as like self-care. I really don't. I look at this as operating with the cycles of nature, honoring who we really are as a human, right? They are acts of care. If you're cooking a meal for your whole family, that's not necessarily self-care. That is an act of care. And if it's hard this time of the year, this can also be an act of survival, of making sure that you make it through this colder, more difficult, more heavy time of the year. Winter is inviting us to create this threshold for ourselves to move into the latter part of the year, right? To listen to what our body and our spirit truly wants. And above all else, with all of these things, and wherever possible in any of this, I make sure to connect with community wherever I can, right? Life is more magical when we're surrounded by magical beings. And so whether this is the recovery circle, rituals within the Recovery Coven, inviting friends over, cooking dinner for friends. Right now I'm, planning to take a dear bestie out for her 40th birthday this weekend, right? Isolation makes winter heavier. Connection is going to soften it. Find out what that means for you. Healing is not meant to be done alone. But please know, all of you that are listening, if January feels heavy, just let it be heavy. Don't feel like it has to be anything else. You're not failing. You're not behind. You are not doing recovery wrong. You're not doing your healing wrong. You're not missing your moment. You're moving through a season that asks for slowness and honesty and care and compassion and grace. Imbolc is almost here, my dear friends. The first spring is almost here. The light is returning, even if it is subtle. Something is stirring beneath the surface of the earth, and I promise something is stirring underneath your surface, even if you can't see it or feel it right now. Remember, you're never alone in this. I'm always here. Until next time, my dear friends, much love, kindness, compassion, and caring, and magic in recovery. We got this, my dear friends.